Welcome to the Ladies' Room, where politics meets women's issues, and we're not here to sugarcoat anything. We're diving headfirst into the stories that matter to women, from Washington power plays to battles over our basic rights. It's bold, it's unapologetic, and yeah, it's going to get messy. Because let's face it, this fight for equality always is. Grab a drink, pull up a chair, and let's get into it. This is the Ladies' Room.
A lot of tech companies get skilled labor like software engineers, developers, those kinds of things. A lot of medical personnel, often like surgeons in specialty fields, have really pissed off MAGA, obviously, because visas equal immigration and somewhat, I guess you could say, permanent immigration. So why we're talking about it is because we found that it is a possible Achilles heel to the MAGA movement and how we can kind of maybe throw a wedge in their movement. And I have a very special guest. Some of you might know this fella. We have Skip. Hello, Skip. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hello, all you out there in Radioland. Thank you for having me on. It's my pleasure.
Yeah. So anyway, you had a really interesting conversation with an anonymous source who happens to be full-blown MAGA.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about your conversation.
Well, a whole lot of it had to do with listening, number one. Unfortunately, sometimes spirits tend to get in the way, but also they tend to reveal truth that we normally wouldn't get from MAGA. And what I mean by that is there's always a hidden code. Like, for example, the border. That means we don't like brown people. You know, that's just the truth that's always concealed by, for lack of better words, shame. Like, how many bigots do you know openly just come out and are like, yeah, I'm bigots, or I'm a bigot, or they like, oh, I got friends that are black too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to get to that truth, it apparently had to take a little bit of sauce. But within that, I learned that the biggest issue right now I like to say that when it comes to MAGA, there's two sections. There's Ma and Pa MAGA, and there's nationalists or white Christian nationalists. You know, it's all in the same camp as far as that's concerned. Well, with the nationalists, this is a huge wedge because immigration is their top number one issue. And this is why they elected Trump. And then Trump gets in and bends the knee to Elon and Vivek, who are calling Americans mediocre and basically saying that no, immigration is what we're going to do to bring in people to do the jobs that you can't do because you're too dumb. And those people are feeling betrayed. They feel that their vote was used to keep him out of prison, and they're starting to see the billionaire influence inside of Trump's cabinet. But this only happened once we were able to get away from the culture war. There was a lot of back and forth with a lot of different culture war topics, and I had to consistently bring it back to the class war. But then once we really got it to where, through a lack of, I suppose, through a lack of allowing sophist rhetoric, continuing to come back to the question in which I asked and keeping it on policy, we were able to find out that This is the issue that they feel, that if Trump turns his back on them, that some of them are ready to boogaloo.
Wow. So you mean Trump turns their back on the whole H1B visa program, or like in everything in general?
No, it turns his back on saying that he's going to allow H1Bs to replace American jobs.
Yeah.
They took our jobs every time, but it comes down to that.
Let me ask you something. When you were talking to him, was he, because a lot of these programs are for very specialized jobs. It's not like they're replacing Americans in like, just, Benny the cashier, or random person, who works at Macy's. Does he realize that a lot of these H1B visas are for like surgeons and software developers, and like they're not replacing Americans, they're like filling in for Americans because we can't fill those jobs, we don't have enough highly, or does that not matter in his
Correct. Nuance is something that completely is washed in grievance. Grievance
Right.
is the number one thing that drives so much of the MAGA mentality.
Right.
Not policy, it's grievance. If you start to ask them, why did you vote, for lack of better words, conservative, you're not going to typically hear the lines when it comes to what is considered fiscally conservative policy. But you will hear about the time that their granddaddy lost their house to the government.
Right.
Now, grievance can be legit, and it can be, well, for lack of better words, made into a personality.
Right. And sometimes the grievance is kind of bullshit because, sometimes you do it to yourself. Like, that's not just with MAGA. Everybody has at some time done something to themselves that causes consequences. Just most of us deal with it a lot more productively than others.
The ability to gaslight yourself, apparently, as we've seen so far, is it's a fairly across the board trait when it comes to the MAGA movement, as we've seen them be able to gaslight themselves on multiple different issues when it comes to electing Trump. So depending on them being on a first name basis with reality is not exactly what we need to do.
I agree.
We need to point out that, yeah, your granddaddy's farm was taken by billionaires.
And that's kind of one of the talking points that I wanted to get into a little bit too, is the victim mentality. So I'll be the first to say that I hear victim mentality, and I just want to cringe. And this would be really difficult for me to do. But I think and I say we as anybody left of center. So I'm talking like just, generic Democrat all the way to the leftist. Like, we really have to look at what we're doing isn't working. And doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results, is literally the definition of insanity, or so they say. So I think you make a really good point, because you told me that the guy was getting like fired up, and then you brought up that you're a victim, and he kind of like retreated a little bit and was like, yeah, and so could you talk a little bit about that? Because I thought that really interesting, and for me to change how I talk to people, as if they're the victim, it really breaks my heart. I really don't want to, because it's like, God, you want to shake them, but maybe that's the way to go. So what do you think?
if you know, if a little bit of sugar, a spoonful of sugar helps medicine goes down,
Right.
if we're going to go ahead and go with this, you not only can point out that they're a victim of billionaire greed, but you are too. It's not left versus right. It's up versus down. This is commiserated.
Yeah.
Like, but the fact that you are telling them that they're a victim lets you know that you are hearing them. That's why Trump, he gained that populist mentality. He used what I like to call stripper 101. Listen to somebody's grievances for 10 minutes, tell them it's everybody else's fault, and you'll be their best friend. So that's exactly what he
Psychology
did.
101.
Yeah,
That's how we're programmed. A little bit goes to,
like be just anybody telling you that your problems are not your fault is very alleviating to people who, for lack of better words, haven't left a 2x2 acre piece of property their entire life. And that was another thing, actually. In the idea of tradition and in the idea of conservative values, there was in this conversation, it was really interesting to me because I'm, for lack of better words, a citizen of the world, a nomad, a troubadour, if you will. Being in one place was not something I wanted to do. I wanted to see what happened when the sun went down everywhere. However, to this particular person, that piece of land that was in their family for 300 years was everything to them.
Right.
And we had this mutual revelation that if you really take away any influence from outside media and you really just look at each other's ways that you grew up, you can see that we are different. Like, I think I have different short-term goals than you have different short-term goals, but we're all getting fucked by billionaires.
Right. Ain't that the truth? So, yeah, that's a good point. And I think, I'm not saying everybody has to go out and go be nice to, random family MAGA person or go make friends with a MAGA. But like, if you're in political commentary, if you're in looking to get over Trump, I think we have to be open and consider other ideas and options on how to break this like stranglehold. And, at first I really was like, after the election, I was so overwhelmed in the respect that how do we fix this? How the fuck do we fix this? Seriously. And, can this be fixed? Maybe should it be fixed? And what I'm seeing more and more is that if you want to bring somebody to your side, not necessarily even bring you, but to lower their guard to hear you, we might want to consider some of these strategies and not with Joe Schmo random MAGA, but like in your family, or a friend, or you were the person you talked to, you had already previously known, and that's all we'll say. But I think going about that strategy kind of disarms them a little bit. Well, shows you're trying to understand them.
I asked a lot of questions because I genuinely wanted to know the mentality of somebody who, and because as a buddy of mine, he'd be willing to be friendly with me and not immediately launch into verbal violence as MAGA loves to do in the moment that they're questioned. So, and also, him being half in the bag
helped.
Yeah, for lack of better words. It made it so that my questions that were pointed questions were at first answered with truth before he could then remember what the talking point was.
Oh, I see. That's funny.
You see what I'm getting at here?
Yeah, I get
Right.
what you're saying.
Right. So the veneer came down, and we got to see the factors that really made somebody hardcore be able to, no matter what Trump did, say, I don't care, that's my dude. And so much of it was just in how different we were. Through no fault of our own.
Yeah,
just
I mean,
how different we were through the way we were raised.
right. And you're I'm assuming you're both like, you're definitely much older than when you had last saw each other. So, life has happened.
Well, sadly, he went through some loss. And so, that was a huge reason also why, I was, kind of giving him a shoulder to cry on too, because losing your parents is never easy. So, that and, him having a couple drinks in him, he was more candid than I was expecting, safe to say. And it was just so interesting in how many things you can learn about somebody who decides to vote right wing just by asking questions and not trying to give any. And this is, I was guilty of this. This was so hard because this was my natural instinct at first, is when somebody tells you something and it's incorrect, you want to even ask a question that might be fact laden. You know what I mean? But I literally tried to step away from the fact that maybe I just pretended I don't know shit, and I just have questions for you. I like, I'm doing an interview. That's it. Just to sort of find out why certain things in the right wing media and messaging attracts a certain breed of person. And so much of it had to do with grievance.
Right. Yeah. And, I think that it's easy to, because I definitely felt, and when I say some of these points, just a side note, or some of these comments, I'm very guilty of committing the same, same errors in messaging, because I didn't think, the election loss taught me something that I clearly did not, I guess, understand about Americans, or maybe I thought, but I didn't realize how widespread it was. And the fact of the matter is like, nobody likes to be painted the villain. And MAGA paints us the villain. We paint MAGA the villain. Nobody, that doesn't help any. And like, Kamala was criticizing Trump, but Trump is an extension of them. He's become that extension. And the movement dies with Trump. Nobody gets to inherit that. There's no heir. Nobody can take over for Trump. Once he dies, there's people that will just have to, who will not follow Ron DeSantis, or I can't think of some of the other people, but you know what I mean? Like, so where I'm going with this is, I think that when and I'm not saying not to attack Trump, because I'm, there's a lot to say about Trump and to call out, and I don't think we should. But I guess what I'm saying is to reconsider, if you're into political strategy or political messaging or election messaging, reconsider more of what the message is. Because it's not working making them the villain. It's not working just attacking Trump as an asshole. In fact, it probably makes them like him more. So I think that's why the top versus bottom is working or proving to work in the preliminary stages, because it puts Trump in an other category, because Trump has never known without, So,
Well,
but go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh no,
I just
I'm
want
just
to caveat
rambling.
off of what you were saying. Go ahead and finish, please.
Oh no, I was just saying, we, and by we I mean the left. If you're into messaging or election stuff, reconsider how you make your message. If like, because how we're making them the villain isn't working. So we have to attack him from a different angle. Say the same things in a different way. So go ahead.
Oh, I mean, I agree with everything that you said. And one of the reasons that I was able to get to this was because the very first time that a challenge came up, a whataboutism came up. And I said, do you know what a whataboutism is? And because this is my buddy, and because I was there for him in his time of need, and because, he also had softened up, from drinking, I suppose.
Right.
He allowed that to go. He said, yeah, you're right. How often do you get that? Okay. You don't get that. So immediately I was like, okay, let's go ahead and start asking some questions, because I got past the whataboutism. It's like that's
a feat.
gatekeeper.
You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of that movie I Am Legend, when Will Smith, he wants to capture one to see if his cure works. Like, I picture you and Gottfried, like, stalking the edges of the internet and like capturing one and bringing them into Discord, like.
It just happened to come to me because, he is having a bad day. So, and it just so happened to turn into a better understanding of each other, not only politically, but also personally, but also gave us this conversation. The thing that I really, really took away from it, as you were just saying, is the more that you said that, Trump is a bad person, the more they were like, yes, he is. And that's our bad person. He lies, but he lies for us. You know what I mean? And so they were to defend him to the death, because he stood with them where they wanted on immigration. He stood it on take my dabs. That's it. But the moment that this issue has Trump turned his back on that part of the base to cater to the billionaire part of the base, who want to bring in immigrants to replace American jobs, this is a wedge. This is a wedge that can only be, for lack of a better word, widened.
Absolutely. Leah, did you have any questions?
Just one more thing real quick. Ma and Pa MAGA care about groceries. Those are the ones who actually give a damn about groceries. Nationalists, they don't care. They want their immigration. Plain and simple. That's what they want. Now, when they don't get that, and that also shows not only Ma and Pa MAGA have been lied to about groceries, but now the nationalists aren't getting their immigration. Who do they got to turn to? The people who say, yeah, it's the billionaires that are fucking you.
And I think, like, we need to be able to turn Trump into the villain, but we're not going to do it by attacking them or him.
I think it's not Trump we need to take. We need to point our sights at.
No, I'm just saying, like, once
it's Elon.
And once Trump sides with Elon, the billionaire part of, he's just one of them. He's not. He lied to you.
In this conversation, we learned that the nationalist side of MAGA do not like Elon and Vivek. And the fact that their Department of Government Efficiency is trying to take away Social Security from possibly their grandparents or their veterans benefits, this makes them dislike them even more. This is a wedge. This is a serious wedge.
Yeah, you have people who have never known without taking away your benefits. Like, and my neighbor, we're not like friendly or anything. He's been very nice, but he's a Trump supporter. He's also a disabled vet with a son who's special needs. Like, his son's an adult, but he lives with him. He can't, he's non-functioning. So when those services get taken away, what are you going to do? Like, he bought that house with a VA home loan. I mean, what are you going to do?
This is the thing, is they're going to try to blame it on the Democrats. But the Democrats have gotten lockstep with the messaging. And it's wonderful for the first fucking time. I don't know how many F-bombs I can drop on your show.
Oh, it's fine. We're not monetized. So, I mean, what are they going to do? Demonetize me? Like,
okay, I just, I'm sitting here swearing like a sailor because I am one.
Fair enough.
It's actually why I joined, so I have this right in conversation. That's why I gave 6.5 years, is so that I can pepper in obscenities and be given a free pass.
It's all right. I'm a sailor.
It's all right, folks. He's been in the water.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, so when it gets to the point when we are consistently on message all the way down to Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries saying, okay, what does renaming the Gulf of Mexico into the Gulf of America have to do with lowering prices for everyday Americans? I mean, this is all the way in written form from Schumer. Everybody is on message. And the message is, you gave so many promises during the election that you were going to lower costs. And now you're
shocked.
And you were saying you were an anti-war president, and now you're talking about wanting to invade Greenland and Panama and Canada and Mexico. So you are actually having imperialistic tendencies, and you're sucking up to billionaires. You're literally, and not lowering grocery prices. You're literally breaking every promise that you've made. And I can't believe it, but from the top all the way down, finally the left has their messaging, and their messaging is lower prices. Come on, you got the House, you got the Senate, you got executive. Let's see those prices lowered. Come on, get to slashing.
Yeah, no, I was surprised that Chuck Schumer of all people was that like snappy. Like,
yeah. I mean,
I was really surprised.
I think it's because I think there was an interview with Jamie Raskin with Jon Stewart, and he said, John actually asked, he said, is being in the minority more fun? Because, you don't really, at the end of the day, it's not your name on the bill. So you sort of get to troll. And I think that Schumer is like, well, fuck it. I'm going to be as on message as I can with Jeffries, and Jeffries is going to be on message all the way down through the House and through the Senate. Every single time that somebody gets in front of a camera, whether it's down to Ted Lieu or Pete Aguilar, they're saying, why aren't they lowering prices? Come on, chop chop.
Yeah, that definitely. Leah, did you have any questions? I'm kind of bogarting time, so.
How dare you take Skip all for yourself?
I know. I'm sorry.
No, there's an interesting conversation in chat about some of the younger generation seeing Trump as their man because he is the villain. And we have a media that has very much amplified the idea of the villain as the actual hero. So when you were talking about not casting Trump as the villain, that makes a lot of sense because they double down. So I thought that was an interesting thing that was happening side by side at the same time.
But they don't like Elon.
Yeah. And I think, like Elon. Yeah, I think making Elon the new villain, it doesn't, because Trump will side with Elon no matter what. I mean, is he going to get rid of H1B visas? Absolutely not. He promised a lot of billionaires. Is he going to deport all these immigrants? he'll probably deport some, but his agricultural billionaires, they need those people. So he's there, and I don't think he'll be able to fake it. Like before the election, I thought that he would do just enough to make it look like he was doing something, but I don't think that'll be enough in the end. So, I don't think MAGA will be satisfied. I hope they're not satisfied.
I learned this extremely fun thing, and that was that policy does not matter as long as their grievances are met. And when it comes to Elon, it's, well, the moment that I said, I called him President Musk. I did. I told him that he was controlling, and he's like, no, he's not. I was like, well, when President Musk finally, and you could have heard the gasket blow over the audio conversation. So if you're listening and you have to really drive the point home that it's Elon in control, call him President Musk.
I wonder how long it will take, if at all, because Trump needs, not that he needs Musk, but I don't know how to articulate it. Trump needs, he can't just shove Elon in a closet, because
no, he bought his campaign.
He can't,
no,
but his ego,
it's impossible.
He can't help himself though. So excuse me. So I have to wonder, could he get rid of him? I don't know, but he definitely will not, get rid of H1B visas.
No, because he can have legal slaves.
Yeah, and I don't know all the intricacies of the H1B visa program. It's very much taken advantage of.
Over to do a great job, in order to live in the United States, possibly to provide for their family, and they work under whatever conditions they're given. If they decide that they don't want to work there anymore, they're deported.
That they can send home, and a lot of them, if they're from the same country, they will live together in a small house and go to work. They'll share bills. They'll show to be able to send more back to their family.
But being able to have that 100% absolute control over your workers, being like, if you step out of line, you're deported, and so is your whole family. I mean, why wouldn't Elon Musk want that?
Yeah.
And but
less likely to join
jobs that could go to Americans. I'm using this in quotes because I'm using it in the way that MAGA would say to basically white people. There we go. Let's just go ahead and
fair enough.
There, let's not beat around the bush, shall we? And so the moment that they see that those jobs are being taken by who Elon is hiring, who is using that as a wedge to get Trump to turn his back on immigration, on the nationalists. This is our indoor, because then we point out, oh yeah, it's because it's the billionaires that can control him, and they could start. But then another thing came up, they go, yeah, billionaires, like Soros, and you're like, yeah, Soros is a billionaire. And so is Musk, and so is Thiel, and name billionaires from the left and the right, because they're all the same ilk. Billions are unpaid wages.
Yeah,
and that's a valid point we can make, is that getting money out of politics on both sides is essential for the average American's needs to be met.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I think is also something, and it's the ladies' room. We try to tie topics to women's issues, but let me ask you this: so the H1B visa program isn't just exploiting the immigrants that come here to do the jobs. Often there are other people that can do the jobs like, a lot of females don't get hired at software companies. And I mean, it's gotten much better now, but women in STEM is still a problem. How do you think, does the female MAGA, are they on the same level, would you think? Or is that like you would have to ask a female who's part of MAGA?
Genuinely, I think that opinions would vary just as they would MAGA to MAGA. But I know that pretty much MAGA consists of two different factions, Ma and Pa MAGA and nationalists.
Yeah.
So
and I think it depends on
Trollovision,
where they fit. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
there's an interesting comment in chat from Trollovision. They said the discrimination against highly qualified local engineers is affecting every demographic, including engineers who have a green card. Valid point, because a green card entitles you to certain protections that having an H1N1 visa absolutely would not. And it's a known fact that those on these work visas are less likely to unionize. I don't think they even can because they don't have citizenship, probably.
Or like a residency status.
Yeah, don't quote me on that, but I'm sure there's a link there.
I think also a genuine reason for lack of female representation in the H1B, I suppose, sector is due to the fact that there's a chance that you might have to take 9 months for leave.
Yeah, that's right. The fear of you getting knocked up. They want you knocked up. They just don't want you working and knocked up and working in a job like at Twitter or, one of those companies.
Another comment that was made in comments that I thought was interesting was pointing out that, Ramaswamy is an anchor baby, and Elon came on an education visa that he never used. So they both benefited from these kinds of programs that Trump has repeatedly said that he opposes. So, and most of Trump's children are anchor babies too. So it's kind of,
well, shamelessness is their superpower.
Exactly. Thank you. Those are the words.
That's very true. And it's like, they also have a very, for me, not the insert whatever comment declaration they make, my family can be anchor babies, but God forbid somebody else has an anchor baby. I mean,
rules for thee, etc.
Yeah. And I think what it is their anchor babies are white most of the time,
It's a whole lot of realizing that eventually tokens get spent. Yeah, like I said, when we can talk to Ma and Pa MAGA, and for lack of better words, even the nationalists, and point out that, hey, the billionaire's boot is on both our necks. It doesn't matter what we mark at the ballot.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if this is still, like, I feel like within MAGA, yeah, you have the nationalists, yeah, you have the Ma and Pa MAGA, and maybe I feel like within Ma and Pa, there's kind of maybe sub-factions, because you have people, like I had a conversation with my father who's become much more MAGA since the last time I was home. He has a model train of the Trump train and this picture in his like little office thing of Trump being prayed over by that. I mean, I'm sure we've all seen that picture. Just like, why do you have a picture?
Gotta have hobbies.
And my dad's really into model trains to begin with, but like that, no, it's not a cult, right? We got into a huge blowout, drag out, really, really awful fight over it. But when we sat down and talked, it really is just he's sick of taxes. And the taxes he's sick of are New York taxes, which Trump can't really do anything about. That's the state of New York. But like, they don't really care about immigration because, where they live, where I grew up, it's been very, very, very diverse since I was a kid. There's somebody from every type of culture, every type of country. And like what Vivek said, I understood what he was saying because I know Indian culture very well, because a lot of my friends were Indian and they were first generation from their parents coming from India. So I don't think he did a good job at articulating it, obviously, because he basically sounded like he was calling Americans morons. But I understood what he was trying to say. Now, let me get back to Ma and Pa MAGA. I feel like there's some MAGA who have one issue, and the Democrats aren't doing anything, so they are voting for Trump because they feel like he can't do any worse than the Democrats. So I have to wonder if like there's people we can break off from that, and I think that's what when I say like not necessarily like we have to break off some of them because we're not going to win elections. That's just what it boils down to. And what the Democrats' message is, they didn't buy it.
The Democrats' message didn't affect their pocket, and we learn from the outgoing polls, the exit polls, that's the number one issue. Not women's reproductive health, not democracy. Nope.
And a lot of those are abstract concepts.
Pocket. Yeah, no, it's their pocket.
What is fascism? Like, obviously, they may know the definition of fascism.
If you tell them fascism is deporting brown people because, you want a white ethno state, there's a great majority of people that go, well, hell yeah, that sounds great. I'm in for that. I like fascism. Hell, you know what I mean? Like,
and they're not. They don't care about the consequences. I mean, they will when they feel the consequences.
No, then they'll just blame it on somebody else. Yeah. So this is why we need to not only start using hashtag MAGAflation, but also we need to ensure that they know that it's because of the elite class. And I'm not talking about the elite class that they are always talking about, the shadowy cabal. I'm talking about if like he filled the motherfucking swamp with billionaires. You know what I mean? Like this, I think when you point out to Ma and Pa MAGA who really don't like the idea that it's billionaires who are making sure that their immigration dreams were foiled, you just point out that, we're literally being ruled by dudes who are unpopular in high school. Like the guy who studied the way of the blade is the gazillionaire that owns our fucking country. Okay. The people that you think are below you because they might be, a nerdy, kind of person who would choose Screech over, Zach, as Vivek said, those are the people who they don't want that faction in their ultra masculine nationalist idea. Yeah. Because they're like, you're nerds. We don't like nerds.
Yeah, you can't tell a bunch of he might be, in fairness, he might be right, but you can't tell your base who are all slaters.
Yeah.
That they need more screeches. Like,
yeah, he's like, he sounds like he should be on the left.
Yeah, and I don't think his principle was wrong, because if you want Americans to have those jobs, you need to educate them. You need to create a culture that promotes education for those things.
I mean, I completely agree with you, but there's just so much of this that feels like, hey, we got your vote. We don't give a fuck about you anymore. Ha 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 ha.
And to caveat off of that, I showed you, I probably should have blacked out her name and to show the audience or whatever, but I spoke with somebody and I wrote a piece on my new Substack, which I will post the link in a minute. I can't walk and chew gum, but and it was basically about how we have to rethink it more on the academics, talking down to people and meeting people where they are when they talk about political issues. And because it's a common problem in academia when you're a teaching faculty member. You have to know who your students are, and a lot of them weren't equipped with the tools they need to succeed in college. So is it unfortunate that a lot of them?
Well, that's a really interesting question for two librarians to actually come to a hypothesis on.
Yeah. So anyway, but the basic gist of it was, we need to rethink how we talk to people when it comes to political election messaging, because what we didn't work. And look, after reflection, I can see how people would feel like they were talked down to. And someone responded with, well, that's too bad if they can't understand big words and blah, blah, blah. And it was like paragraphs she was sending me, utter paragraphs about how, it's a shame that when my kids were in school, there was more standards and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, that's great.
In my day.
That's wonderful. I would love those standards back. But guess what? That's not our reality. And let's say
it's no mistake that they're dumbing down education, talking about getting rid of
it's
the
no
Department of
mistake.
Education, censoring books. It's so that you don't think and you can just be a low-paid worker and they can bring in these highly educated. Exactly.
And so
it's all tied together.
It's all tied together. Exactly. And so we went back and forth, but I was like, you do what you want to do. I just don't think you should be in charge or try to message, in campaigns or political activities, because you're basically saying, I'm going to use big words, even though they may not understand the context. I was like, the average American, while we think it's ridiculous, they don't understand what fascism or democracy has to do with it. Want to know why? A, they probably want fascism, but B, they don't have any reference point of what fascism is. Sure, they might have learned about World War II. They might have learned about dictators. That's all great. But it's one thing to learn about it. It's another thing to live it. And America's history has never had fascism like that.
In the moment that you would point out to MAGA the fascistic tendencies, you would get, no, he's not going to do that.
And
so even as the find out era comes, they might need a little encouragement to be like, yeah, he did that. I mean, I hate to say it, but you have to say, and this is the tough love part, and it hurt every time that he realized this, is you have to say, but you voted for that.
But I think you make a valid point about how you talk to people, and you do have to know your audience. And being an elitist and saying, well, it's not my fault you don't know big words. Listen, the conversation Skip had, the reason it worked is because he spoke to him as another human being. And he said, what are your concerns for yourself and your family? Those are also my concerns. Okay, who do you think is responsible for it? I think it's so-and-so. Okay, that's a thought. I think it's so-and-so. And then you talk about it. And when we remove the labels and the politics of it and just talk as two human beings of, I'm worried about keeping a roof over my head, keeping my house heated, educating my children. And they're like, yeah, me too. And you're like, okay, great. These are my concerns. And they say, these are my concerns. Okay, we agree on all of this. We just don't necessarily agree on how we get there. So let's talk about it. But when we throw the big words and they feel dumb or they feel talked down to, they're shut off immediately. There's no solutions to be had because you've already told them that they're not part of the conversation.
Let's go ahead and say, let's use the border. Okay, let's use this. And they say, well, the Biden border was the most insecure border, and Trump's going to fix it. The moment that you say, but there was a bipartisan plan that was put in place, that was put forward by a conservative senator, that was torpedoed by Trump in order for him to be able to run on it, you've already A, lost them because you're talking about policy, and B, in the end, Trump is bad. You're not going to get through like that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And, I know it. I'm not saying you start kissing MAGA's ass or anything like that, and it can feel like that's what I'm saying, because I feel like that's what I'm saying. But it's really just more about what's your goal and do you want something that works? And I think we all, however we engage in politics, whether it's, at a local level or if we do our own, we help with campaigns, or I think we all have to figure out. And that's why I wanted to have you on, Skip, because I didn't want to tell about your experience. I kind of wanted you to, you're the better narrator of your experience. So I thank you for coming on. But we have to just kind of, Trump's going to be president in 10 days. So we have to figure out how to like slow this shit down that he's trying to do, and how we break this fever dream.
Well, I think if we can just stick to not only the messaging of up versus down, but also if we ask questions, but mostly is when you ask questions about policy. And when I don't say that is tell me what policy, it's you tell them what policy is being enacted as we speak. And when they say, but I don't like that, you have to say, but you voted for it. You're a victim of being tricked.
Yeah.
Because you have to let them know that they need to point their grievance where it belongs and not at the culture wars.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, I really think, looking at top versus down messaging, I think that's really the only way. And I hate the us versus them thing.
Yeah.
I really do. But I think that's how Trump, what, side note, as the election was crouching up, I saw all these signs all over my town. Most of I live in Georgia. I would see all these signs that said Kamala, crime, Trump, security. Like, and I do this stupid voice that cracks up my husband because it just sounds so petty.
Yeah.
Like, nanny, yeah.
Rob Schneider is a carrot.
Yeah. So anyway, and it was different things like my favorite one, or his favorite one that I do because the voice sounds so much funnier, is like Trump, secure border, come in, open border, and it was just so ridiculous. And but it's us versus them in signage.
You cannot have nuance or neutrality inside of a fascist mentality.
Exactly. And you know what? Take the person that you spoke with. I'm sure eventually nuance will show up, because it always does. Like, you have this extreme, think fascism's great till they come for you. And it may not, they're trying to get you into a camp, but they might arrest your mother, father, sister, brother, child. They might take.
Yeah, go ahead.
They will take something from you because that's how it works.
The thing that really blew my mind was that if they were truly lied to by Trump, then the next option was Boogaloo. It's literally narcissistic collapse in mass form. And I stopped and I go, but what about the rest of us who didn't vote for Trump? We get caught up in that shit. And, does it not matter that the rest of civilization, and the moment that I said that, he kind of stopped and it was like, wait, what? I was like, yeah, what about the young babies who didn't ask to be part of your mass narcissistic collapse, who just want formula, but now they can't get it because, there's
Civil War is an ugly thing. And there's a movie called Civil War. I never buy movies. I bought that one because it's haunted me for months since I've seen it. And the reason why it haunts me is because that's what Civil War would look like in the United States. It's not going to be rows and rows of soldiers pointing muskets at each other and boom, it's going to be almost guerrilla style warfare around our country. And you see these landmarks being destroyed by Americans fighting each other. And I think every American should see it, not because it's all that great of a movie, but it really puts into perspective think about how that feels, like being a refugee out of Philadelphia,
and the billionaires are in their bunkers having caviar.
Exactly. And, it doesn't they're romanticizing a civil war, which will never, especially the people like Marjorie Taylor Greene or the wealthy politicians, they call for civil war. Well, they don't think that their lives are going to be affected by it. But a civil war would be the worst thing. And this is what I thought was a really good point in the movie, is like these journalists try to buy a couple of gallons of gas or a couple of gas containers full of gas, and she says, "How about 300 for a half a tank and 2 cans?" And he's like, 300 will get you a sandwich. And she's like, "No, Canadian." And he's like, "All right." So the dollar is worthless. So people are worried about inflation now. People are taking Canadian money instead of, which is nothing wrong with Canada, obviously, but like, it's
when currency's been destabilized.
Yeah, and the only reason why not the only reason, but a good chunk of the reason why we've become the most powerful, most wealthy, is our political stability. Mm-hmm. Other countries put their gold in our reserves because we're stable, and our governments aren't going to overturn, or at least up until now. But
there was a lot of unpaid labor in Manifest Destiny that also that helped America get to where it's at as far as its financial status in the world. But I completely agree with everything that you said.
So
exactly, there's some really interesting conversations happening in chat again. Trollovision again is speaking about their personal experience as someone with that type of visa, and I have suggested that they contact us because their personal lived experience would be very valuable.
Absolutely.
Obviously, we do not have that lived experience, so that would be very helpful. Also, a good conversation about how the 14th Amendment was supposed to have banned slavery and indentured servitude, but we're still seeing that with the way we treat our migrant workers, the way we treat our visa holders, the whole green card program. There's still a lot of that unpaid labor happening. And Skip, I love that you mentioned that how do I put it? The foundations of American society are built on colonialism and slavery and
Manifest Destiny and slavery.
Yeah, that's what we did, and we've never dealt with that, and we've never reconciled ourselves with that. We hold ourselves to these high ideals, but we don't talk about that stuff. So I think there's a very interesting conversation to be had there about all of that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I posted in the chat a conversation I had with ChatGPT. While Skip was telling me about this yesterday, I think you had said, I wonder what ChatGPT would say. I was like, well, let's go see. So I typed in the first question I asked was, why does Trump's base feel like they were betrayed by him siding with Elon over H1B visas? And it's listed a bunch of reasons, but immigration was one of them. And why, I'm not saying ChatGPT is the pinnacle of all knowing, but one thing that it does is it scrapes the internet, and it scrapes all areas of the internet. So it goes to places that you normally wouldn't think to look, or where people are talking,
don't want to go,
or don't want to go. Comments that are made, and it captures a sort of real-time picture of what's on the internet. And not saying this is, we should take this at face value, but I really think that it was interesting that it picked up on the different kind of nuances that we were talking about. The second question I asked was, so is there a possibility for internal collapse if MAGA as a whole feels it has been lied to? And it was like, yes. And it gave a whole bunch of reasons if you're interested in the conversation. But it's really the visas that is one of the biggest fissures that would be number one. And then I asked the third and final question was, do you think there is a simple issue that would deeply divide the MAGA movement so deeply it would cause its collapse, like a wedge issue? And I asked it like this because sometimes ChatGPT gets weird about politics and says, I don't want to answer that. And so I was kind of like not tricking it, but being careful how I worded things. So it said, definitely. And immigration is definitely one of them. Big tech and free speech, abortion and culture issues, foreign policy, Ukraine and isolationism, COVID-19 and public health, people who want vaccines and anti-vaxxers, and a whole bunch of others that you can read. But the big three are immigration, big tech, and abortion. And so I just thought it was interesting that ChatGPT picked up these points that we've been talking about, and obviously it's not like this is it, we got to go with it, but it's just an interesting thing to look at.
As somebody who's a big fan of data and culture lining up, after this conversation, and we got, for lack of better words, the source right from, I would say, deep MAGA mentality without somebody who, literally does Sig Heils. So for us to have found out through all of that immigration and the visas was the number one issue, and then ChatGPT reaffirms it like that, we're onto something.
Yeah, we're onto something. So, I think it's kind of interesting to ask ChatGPT questions, like cultural questions. Sometimes it tells you that it can't answer that, but then just say please, and then it'll be like, oh, okay, actually I can answer it. So sometimes you have to word it in the right way. But it was eye-opening that was, we are talking about that as like how it's the issue, and then ChatGPT says this is a big one.
It was just so interesting how everything that we had talked about prior came up and more. So I think that it'd be really interesting to take other AI models and run the same scenario and find out where the overlap is, and then the areas where there's no overlap, that's just extra messaging.
Right. Yeah. It was definitely eye-opening, and writing that article and hearing some of the comments that came from it, because I get why, especially and part of my Substack, which I don't know if I put I changed its name from the Mighty Librarian to the Library of Democracy, but let me get the link. Y'all know I can't walk and chew gum. Here it is.
Plug your stuff.
That's the Substack. Everything, like my contacts and for the ladies' room, is all in the description. I don't think I put the Substack thing if you didn't catch that link, but here's the link tree for Library of Democracy. I wrote the article in the Library of Democracy. It's free. If you want to do a paid subscription, that's great. If not, it's free. But the comments, especially that academics made, what I really wanted to do with it is kind of translate dumb fuck and normal people into academic, and academic into normal people and dumb fuck. Because I think a lot of us feel the same way. We're just not talking to each other in the way that we can understand. And academics, like I said in the beginning, have this nasty habit of loving to hear themselves talk. And they can't see the forest through the trees.
Everybody wants to be right.
And it's okay to be wrong. I'm wrong all the time. Like, there we go. I said it. Like, everybody's wrong at some point. I was wrong about the, messaging in the election. I was dead wrong.
When people can use whataboutism as a defense every time, then it's extremely hard to admit that you're wrong. So that's why once I got past the initial gate, I was like, okay, let's see what happens.
It's hard. It's hard. Like, I applaud you and Gottfried for having this conversation, because
it wasn't
hard.
Difficult. It was just, well, if you're a curious creature like me, and especially curious into the mentality of people who put the country where it is and how we can possibly message, it was a labor of love.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and
as we wrap up. Do you have anything you would like to plug, Mr. Skip?
Yes. Where
Yeah,
can we
just go
find
to
you?
www.skipfranzjr.net and all my trash is there.
Oh, it's not trash. You do some really good stuff.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
As far as
And
like
as
music
always,
and all that stuff.
As always, we like to call out the Tony Michaels podcast. He also has a Substack and is now has a
His link.
Substack.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Derek
I thought.
Derek posted his link tree earlier, I believe.
Oh, and I
does
have
a
it
Substack
in the
as well.
bottom too, in the description.
Oh,
I put
perfect.
I always put his because he lets us
Well,
use his software, so I can't not plug him. That would be rude. Like,
Well, we always forget to do the internet
yeah,
stuff, the
we
like,
don't. We're
subscribe
not good
crap.
at.
We're not good at that.
Yeah. So my goal
Terrible at
is
that.
by the end of the month to make it to get 10 more subscribers. So if you haven't subscribed, just click the subscribe so we can get to like 1770. My goal is 2,000 by the end of July. I don't think that's too unrealistic. So, but 770 would be really great by the end of the month. So, just trying to make
Skip,
it.
Amy asks if Dive Bars will be on tomorrow.
It will.
Yes,
Ooh.
and I will be on
Same
Dive Bar.
bat time, same bat channel.
A good time will be had by all.
Same miscreants.
If you're that unfortunate.
Well, thank you very much, Skip, for joining us. Thank you all for listening. I really appreciate it. We will be back again for the ladies' room next week. And we will see y'all later. Good night, guys.
Later, guys.